Hi, Insta. Hope to see many of you on here because we are discussing something really exciting, which is how to date from a Jewish perspective. What is the secret to Jewish dating? And I am going to be joined by Gila Ross, who has just joined, walked into the room. Hi, Gila. And we're going to be discussing the secrets of Jewish dating and also who to talk to when you're dating, which is really important. We don't really discuss that. It was Gila's idea. And who do we speak to? How do you choose who to speak to about your dating? And so I want to see if Gila is going to come in. Can you request to join? Let me see. Also Q&A. Some of you put in some cute questions earlier. Hi guys, thanks for coming on. I want to hear from you guys.
Hi.
There she is. She's
There
there.
we go.
Hi.
Hello.
So good to see you.
How are you, Jackie?
It's been so long.
I know. I'm so excited to be live with you, the guru of Jewish dating. This has
Well,
been this has been an incredible Jewish week for dating for me because we had Elisa Ben Shalom in Denver on Saturday night,
I love her.
and now I get to speak live with you.
Amazing.
So this is fantastic.
And we do very different things. I've done many lives with Elisa. I love her, and she calls me a secret weapon because I do a different something. We do very different things, and they go together very well. But it's sort of like a deeper. We'll get into it, but it's the deeper shift that I think needs to happen for many people, not all people. And I went through it. Really, the reason I'm any sort of experience in Jewish dating is because I went through that journey myself for a long time. And I made a deal with God and said, if you get me married, I'll help singles, thinking I'll just dabble on the side. And no. Hashem, God had a different plan for me and threw me front and center into helping singles because I really get it. I get it from the inside. And I'm so glad that we're here to have an empowering conversation because I think a lot of conversations about dating for singles is about what are you doing wrong? What are you doing? Let's assume there's something wrong with you and you're doing something wrong. And that's very disempowering for singles and was for me for many years. And I think that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in dating where we end up feeling bad about ourselves. Like there must be something intrinsically wrong with me. And so then that affects the dating and it becomes this whole cycle, right? Vivian's like, yay, so true. It really is. And I'm trying to change that conversation from a married person's perspective and a dating coach. And I know Tzipora Grodko is a good soul sister of mine, is trying to change that conversation from the singles end as a singles advocate. Let's change the conversation around empowering singles to think in a positive way that this is a deeper journey for them that Hashem is designing for them on purpose rather than randomly there's something wrong with them, they're a loser, they're nebuch, and that they have something to fix and everyone else is good and put together, So we're going to change the conversation. Yay. So good.
Yeah.
Someone's saying that. Thank you.
It's so important because the truth is this so applies in the single world, but it applies in any area, right? Because like so often when we're struggling with something that it's interesting because I actually just gave a class on this morning, and I know this is not what our topic is, but
I know I just started coming out of me. I'm like, I don't know why this is coming out of me, but someone obviously needs to hear it or it's meant to be the topic. I don't know.
Jackie, you know why? Because it's the time of year, right? Because it's coming up to Tu B'Shvat, right? And one of the things that Tu B'Shvat celebrates is the fact that progress happens even when we don't see it, right? Tu B'Shvat is in the dead of winter because that's when the sap is happening and it's internal and all that progress is happening. And winter and single and whatever it is that we're struggling with is not just a time for waiting to get married, but it's a time where we're making all those incredible changes and we're not doing anything wrong. We're just doing it right. We just have to have the patience to wait and see those changes come out.
And so. I love that. I love that analogy. I would never have made that analogy. And also that when you're doing the work, it feels like absolutely nothing's happening. It feels like absolutely nothing's happening until boom, it happens. And I think that idea of, when a seedling starts to regrow, it has to rot first. Not that we're rotting, Godfrey, that's a terrible analogy, but but there's a feeling of being broken down, which is definitely what I experienced personally. I experienced this feeling of like being kind of stripped away. Like you try everything as a single and it just doesn't happen. and you just think like nothing's happening, and there's like the death of winter, as you said, is this despair and this like this bareness of like there's, you know, feeling alone, feeling cold and alone. It just that's the idea of winter for me anyway. I'm Australian, so I don't even know what winter is. But the idea that at the end of that cycle, boom, there's a regrowth, right? And I think that that's beautiful, that we don't see often the effects of what we're doing and the seeds we're planting and what's happening. And I know that for sure because I know exactly how I felt when I was single, and now I see the fruit of it in marriage, of even the pain of waiting, and the pain of waiting feels like nothing's happening. It's just impossibly hard and difficult. But in marriage, it was the pain of waiting that kind of carved out in me an appreciation and a perspective that I couldn't have got any other way. Like I couldn't have got it. So now, you know, there's the stereotype. I was laughing with my husband the other night because there's a stereotypical thing: men leave their dirty socks on the couch, right? Or dirty socks on the floor. And it's like, I just thought that was a funny little stereotypical thing. And then I saw dirty socks and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a real thing. I'm like, honey, there's dirty socks. Like, this is the thing. And he's looking at me like, are you okay with this? Are you? And I'm like, in the scheme of anything real in life, like who cares about, thank God I could pick up dirty socks.
Right.
And I don't know, like, you know, again, that's just like a metaphor for so many things, but it gives perspective. So even the journey of that cold, harsh winter, right, just to go with your analogy, really gives you a lot that you don't realize in that time. And you sometimes only see it later.
Yeah, and here's the thing: when we walk past trees in the dead of the winter, we don't turn around to them and say, oh my gosh, what are you doing wrong? We don't give up at them. We don't, whatever. We just realize you got to have patience. Just got to wait, right? And it's the same thing with ours, right? Like when we're single, dating, you know, going through a struggle, it's not like, oh my gosh, what are you doing wrong? It's like, okay, keep going, keep making the progress, just have patience, right? We don't give up on trees. Why give up on yourself?
Right.
On others, right?
Yeah, and God's got your back. It's by design. You're single by design, not by punishment, is one of the favorites that I like to say. It's not, you're not forgotten. It's not an accident. And by the way, I do want to make a disclaimer, because I know you have a very broad crowd watching you, that this is really the same thing as any Nisayon, any test that we're in. You're in the unknown, you don't know the outcome, you're scared, and you feel out of control. Like that is the basis of every test. And every test is really about trusting in the dark. And so whatever that is about keep going, do your own inner work, do whatever tikkunim, any fixing that you need to do. And at the right time, God's going to change that situation for you. For most people, that's what happens. I mean, really. And it's impermanent. It's going to change. Whatever situation you're in, it's going to change.
Right.
So we have to work out how do we build ourselves in the dark.
Yeah, and I like that you said that, and you clarified it, because for my audience, for those who are not necessarily single, but I think we all have areas of struggle, and part of this, and I write about this in my book a lot, is that it's trusting in ourselves as well, right? Because we so often we don't see the progress, and we're so hard on ourselves, and we we kind of like feel like, what am I doing wrong, right? When we hit that dark patch, when we're not necessarily doing anything wrong, right? Sometimes we just need to realize that the struggle is part of life, right? And everyone has it, and the struggle is just evidence of us being alive and keeping on putting in the effort and doing it. And it's part of what makes that real, right? Like, as you said, you know, your struggle of being single for so long and dating is what has carved out this space for this beautiful relationship.
Yes, and I think that is true, and like I want to say it's true, and we have to know that like there's nothing intrinsically wrong with us, and at the same time
we all have areas
to look at, well, what
to grow.
What does Hashem want me to do? Because I do want to say again, without freaking anyone out, you can stand in your own way of being the vessel to receive what Hashem wants you to give you. So you can stand in your way and block yourself, and I've seen it many times. You know, I run a course with single women. And last month, 4 out of the 20 something, as they changed internally and became more open, their husbands walked into their life in the middle of the course. I mean, it was insane.
That's amazing.
It's amazing because, and that showed me like, I just got to get in awe of the work. Like when you do the work inside and you become a vessel that can receive, God can give you more things. Like that's really what it is. So, but it's to get there is so hard. You can't do it with that as a trick. You know, like I'm going to do this as a trick so I get more things. Like doesn't you can't manipulate God. You can't treat God like a vending machine. But you really have to do the work of surrender, of acceptance, and particularly as what I love that you said is trusting yourself and working with yourself and accepting yourself and loving yourself and knowing your value. And when you work on here, this between you and you, it's not the same as between us and God, right? Everyone's focused on God. You got to trust God, and it's true. You do have to do that work, but it's different work to trusting yourself and to building a really solid, positive relationship with yourself. And I know it's cliche, but if to the level that you have that positive relationship with yourself is the level that you can receive from others, and that you will be seen in that light from others because you're valuing yourself in a certain light. And I think that that's my experience is that's a lot of the work. A lot of that work is that work, building seeing your value and really knowing your boundaries. And you know, I want to address what you brought up to me privately about who do we speak to about dating, because I think you're so right. It's very rarely spoken about, and people give their power away to other people so much because they don't trust themselves, but they give the power away to the wrong people.
Right.
And the wrong people who, even if they're well-meaning and nice people and they love you, they're not the right people because they're coming either from their own fears and anxieties, or that, which like I would have, if you could take away one thing from this live, I would say make sure that whoever you speak to about your dating is someone with real trust in God, someone who really trusts Hashem and is not coming from fear and anxiety and narrow-mindedness and judgment, which is all from fear. Someone who's really wants your best interest and really is objective, which is not necessarily family, immediate family, right? Even though of course you can talk to your immediate family. Your mentor and your person that can guide you is also someone who should be also somewhat objective and really trust in Hashem, because I feel so much fear mongering coming from the single scene and the single world. You know, the shit off crisis. I just spoke at Ohel Sarala last week, which is 850 Beis Yaakov girls, single Jewish women who were ages 21 to 35, let's say. And my topic was, are you in a shit off crisis? Like, is there a shit off crisis?
Right.
And, you know, absolutely not. A crisis is a mindset. And we want to be in a growth mindset, which builds you, not a crisis mindset, you know? So I don't know, what are your thoughts on who to speak to?
So you started with a mentor, and I think sometimes what we do is we speak to friends, and friends have a very, very valuable place in it. And there's a difference though. So, and I again, I've got a whole chapter on this in my book. My book's Living Beautifully, but called Living Beautifully. It came out in August. But let's talk about mentor first, right?
What's it about?
So it's actually, it's the subtitle of it is How to Bring Meaning, Joy, and Love into Your Life, based on the timeless wisdom of Pirkei Avot. So Pirkei Avot, for anyone that doesn't yet know about it, is part of the oral law, and it's the only part of the oral law that's focused only on Jewish values and ethics. And the amazing thing about it is that you know, it was written thousands of years ago, and yet you open it up and you read it, and it's, oh my gosh, they could be talking to us, right? Their lives were so different, and yet the content of the human struggle is the same, right? There are so many things that, like, I started it as a podcast, as a series on my podcast, and it resonated so well with people that I turned it into a book.
Wow.
But so many people were kind of like, oh my gosh, that could be talking to me, right? Different people, different areas of life. So it's really, really amazing to see these like timeless ideas that could applied when back in the time of the sages, and now when we have social media and you know, a different world, and it gives us so much advice. So in terms of mentors, like, what are we looking for in a mentor, right? We live in the age of Google. We live in the age of like Instagram and TikTok. We all have like this, there's so much advice at our fingertips, right? And what a mentor is, a mentor has to have two things, right? So it's kind of like, let's say you have a sore throat, right? So you're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go into the pharmacy. Go into the pharmacy. You see there's a section for remedies for sore throats, and you say, you know what? I'll buy them all, right? And you take them all. It's ridiculous. You're not going to do that because you don't know, right? You go to the pharmacist, you go to the doctor, and what do they have? They have two things. Number one is they have knowledge of medicine and the body. And the second thing is they have they take the time to understand you and your symptoms, right? And then with these two pieces of knowledge, they can give you advice. And I think that's what we're looking for in a mentor, right? We're looking for someone who has, so let's bring it back to dating, right? We have someone who has understanding of the dating process, right? Has understanding of relationships, and who takes the time to really understand you, right? Because that's what, you can't just go to anyone. Sure, you can DM Jackie, and I'm sure Jackie's amazing to DM her. But what, and how do you know, right? Like, how do we know that Jackie's gonna be amazing? Because if you DM her, she's gonna ask you questions, right? She's gonna try and find out what's going on for you. She's not just gonna give you some standard advice, right? I'm sure you don't just give standard advice, because you understand what being a mentor is, right? So it's those two pieces of advice. It's that it's someone who has knowledge in this particular area where we're looking for guidance, and who has the time and that relationship to understand us deeply, and then can give us advice based on that.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I would add in a third component that I would look for as well as those two, which is I want to see that they are living in a way that I admire, especially in that area. If it's about marriage, or like, I wouldn't go to someone who doesn't have kids as for parenting advice. I probably wouldn't. I mean, I might be interested in their opinion if they've read stuff, but I wouldn't take, like, are they embodying what they're saying as well? Is it experiential? Like, is it, I think that that is important. When I was single, I didn't feel I could speak a lot on dating. Like, I just felt like, not saying that singles can't, but for me, I just couldn't. So for me personally, I feel that seeing someone live whatever it is I'm going to them regularly for, and
Yeah,
then I think that that speaks volumes as well, because people can
100%.
say a
Yeah.
lot, and so yeah, I agree with that, and I think that that's the key here, is that not
And Jackie, I'm so glad you clarified it, because what I meant when I said knowledge was lived knowledge, right? It's not enough to just have book knowledge.
yes,
It's someone who has, and that's, I guess, the difference between going to a doctor, right? The doctor doesn't have to have gone through that. But what a doctor has done is they haven't just read the book. They've gone through years and years of medical school. They've gone through residency, training,
yes,
etc., right? Which is all like really solid internalizing learning, right? And when we're talking about life advice, it's absolutely,
right,
I agree with you 100%. Someone who has that lived
yes,
experience, lived knowledge, and I think that's what makes you such a powerful dating coach, is because you've been through that process, right? You understand the work that it takes to get to where your clients need to get to.
yeah. The first big step is to not judge yourself for any work that you need to do or want to do, or because the judgment is what blocks us straight away. In the dating process, if you want to know what blocks me, it's judgment, self-judgment, and judgment of others. Obviously, if you judge others, you judge yourself. But the judgment of, I can't acknowledge what's wrong with me because I'm so scared I shame myself and I feel so bad about myself that the whole thing just crumbles. Now, if you're meant to do some work on yourself and grow and learn and expand, that's going to stop that process straight away. And that's where I see a lot of singles get stuck, is they don't want to admit anything is wrong, or they're scared, or whatever it is, because they can't, because the whole of society is already looking at them with that lens. There's something wrong with you, because if there wasn't, you'd be single. That is the biggest load of nonsense I've ever heard, because the biggest proof of that is that if you just look around for 5 minutes, there's plenty of dysfunctional couples married. Plenty of really toxic, dysfunctional people get married. Like Hashem brings them their husband or their wife. So you can't say that that's the prerequisite that God's waiting for to get you married, right? Is I have to get to a certain level of everything's great. I have no issues. I mean, this is just nonsense, but it is
None of us would be married then,
right,
right?
and it is what the Jewish world, I feel, sort of implies in an unspoken way. I got it a lot for many years, that there must be something you're doing wrong, otherwise you'd be married. That's the presumption, right? And
Well,
it's not true.
and it's so not a Jewish value, because
Right.
we say every single morning, L'Ekai Neshama, God, the soul that you gave me, Tahora, he is pure, right? It doesn't matter who you are. right? Like even a murderer is getting up and saying that in the morning, right? What that means is that in essence, we have a holy, pure soul,
Right.
right? And I think that's what Judaism, one of the beautiful things about Judaism is it's able to separate the action from the person. And to me, I mean, a big part of what I do is relationship coaching and parenting coaching. And where if you can separate your actions from who you are in such a different place to build your relationships, because when we like, confuse the things that we do with the things that we need to fix with who we are, we get so caught up and defensive, and it just blocks us from moving forward in life. It blocks us from it shows up as a block in a relationship, in every area of life. Like, I mean, we all know people who are toxic or or right, like you can't say sorry and whatever, and all it comes from is that most often, a lot of times, what it comes from is that defensiveness, because they feel like if I say, if I admit that I'm wrong here, it devalues me, right? Like, but that's Judaism separates the two, right? Even when it comes to the high holidays, and we're saying all the things that we did wrong, we're never saying I'm a bad person. We're all
Yeah.
saying I did wrong, and Judaism teaches us you did wrong. This is what you're going to do to fix it. Don't worry about it, right? But first, separate the two, right? Because
Yes.
who you are is a pure soul, right? Intrinsically worthy, intrinsically healthy. And I want to ask you a question on something that you said, because I've noticed this come up sometimes with people who are considering going into the dating world, or starting to date, and sometimes people feel like, all these concepts you learn about, like, you got to love yourself first, and you got to this, and like, I'm not there yet,
Yeah.
right? So am I ready to start dating? And I'd love to hear your opinion, but for me, I feel like, as soon as you have awareness that this is what I need to do, you're ready, right? Because none of us, I don't think any of us are there yet, wherever
Where's
there
there?
is,
Yeah.
right?
I was about to say, where is there? And every time you get there, there's a new, you're here, and then there's a new there. So
Right.
so I think that it's about expanding your consciousness and jumping into the process. And often you actually can't grow until you're in the process and you're getting feedback from your actual process. So I would say jump in. I get asked that question maybe once every week or two at least, about how do I know I'm ready for dating? Like, how do I know I'm ready? Which is a good question to ask, by the way, because at some point you have to decide I'm ready to start dating, right? But I think that it's even in the process of dating gets you readier, and God designs that process for you. So every person you date, if they're not your spouse, they're there to teach you something. They're there to teach you, help you clarify something for yourself, or you're there to help the other person teach them something, right? God brings you together for a reason. There's a purpose, there's a learning, there's a lesson. And even if the lesson is like, I need to vet my dates more carefully so I don't keep going out on completely out of the ballpark dates and get burnt out, which is a big problem, is everyone goes out because they don't trust themselves. They give their power away. They don't want the shashan or the matchmaker to look down on them. So they say yes to a thing that they never have interest in, a date that they never have interest in. They go out, they feel really depressed, and they come home and eventually get burnt out. So setting boundaries and standing up for yourself, all these things you have to learn as you're dating. Believing in yourself, trusting your perception, all this stuff, and also that can be taught as you go. So that's probably the main work I do. Top two things I do with most of my singles is trusting, learning how to trust yourself, right? It's not just talking about the concepts. How do I actually trust myself? How can I make the biggest decision of my life and actually trust that I'm making it accurately? So I always talk about 5 pillars of self-trust, right? Aligns with Torah, which is a map. Obviously, it has to be aligned with Torah, can't be against Torah, whatever the decision is in life. Have a mentor, which we've already discussed. So they're your 2 external points. And then head, heart, gut. 3 internal points we want to tap into inside of us. And the problem is they all give different feedback. It's like different, they're on different frequencies, so to speak, and they give different feedback, and all 3 need to be aligned when you get married to someone. And again, there's horror stories that I've heard of people just listening to their head and jumping in. And this is what we were going to talk about at the beginning, which was like the Jewish approach to dating as well, is that we do date head to heart, head over heart, right? The head first, because the seichel, the intellect is important. It has to make sense. You have to align, you have to be logical. but we have to be in tune with the other faculties, the heart and the gut, because it's a subjective decision. And it's no one else outside of you. Please listen to this. No one else outside of you can tell you who to marry or not marry. No one. Why? Because they're not inside the relationship with you. They're just hearing aspects about the relationship from you. They're not actually in the whole experience of the relationship, which is why we can never judge another relationship. You know, unless something's obviously objectively abusive, we cannot judge another relationship, another marriage. We have no clue what happens behind closed doors. So too, when you're dating, no one can know what's happening inside the relationship for you. And you have to learn to trust yourself so that you actually take responsibility for this decision. Because I've seen so many people give that power to a mentor, to a rabbi, to a coach, to whoever, to make that decision. And then many divorces later, right, it wasn't the right decision, or they get pushed in. You'll work it out in marriage. You don't need to be attracted. You'll work it out in marriage. Or it doesn't matter. The feelings come much later. You don't have to feel anything now. It's true, feelings come later, but you've got to be attracted to your spouse. You cannot get married if you're not attracted. You can't twist yourself. I called it pretzeling. I did a story on it yesterday. You can't twist yourself into a pretzel to think you should like someone because they're a nice person. I'm sorry, you just cannot. I'm going on my rant now. I'm going to behave myself a little bit.
No,
But
yeah, I love what you're saying, and I love your whole mindset of like understanding that the whole thing is process designed for you, right?
yes,
The whole dating process is a process for you to, because we all have different things to learn in life and to grow in life, and that's why everyone's dating process is different. And what you're saying about the head, the heart, and the gut, like they're there also to help us in life. And I think what the externals, right, the mentor and the friends and are there for is they can help us understand ourselves more, right? But ultimately,
yes,
we decide who our mentors are, right? We
correct.
decide who to listen to, right? We decide which friends are you know, like we ultimately have to have that decision process, right? And understanding that, you know, we God put us into a world with other people, right? And we do relationships, not just the dating relationship, but all relationships is such a major part of our lives, right? And they're there to help us understand ourselves, to help us grow, right? Not just mentors, friends as well. And again, it's the right friends, right? You know, someone who a friend is I talk about three things that a friend is. A friend is someone that number one, you're able to be open and honest with each other, right? That, you know, you're, because sometimes and you're talking about, you know, abusive relationships, right? Sometimes outsiders can see red flags that a person in a relationship can't. And if you have a friend who is where you have that friendship where you can talk to each other with, or sometimes even, you know, we're dragging our feet in a relationship, or right, like friends who have that relationship where we're able to, number one, be open and honest to each other with each other, and number two, be willing to hear that openness and honesty with each other is invaluable, right? Because it
Yes,
really can give us a greater understanding, right? Friends that we can have you know, these deep meaningful conversations with,
not
right?
just
So that we can sort
not
of,
just
yeah,
not just friends
go ahead.
who want to back you up and support you. It has to be a friend who can push back on you.
Yes,
So I think friends, we call friends like friends, but they're our cheerleaders and they're just cheering for whatever we're saying. That's not a real friend,
yeah,
because sometimes a real friend is about challenging you and pushing back a little bit with love. But it's not about, sometimes friends will just agree with whatever and sort of take a side and feel they're being supportive. But I think we should be wary of that. If you can't have a friend that can, like, I actually called a friend last night. I called a friend last night about a situation I had with another friend. And I called this friend and said, listen, I just got this feedback from another friend and it doesn't resonate. Like, do you experience me this way? And I said, tell me honestly, you know, and I called her because I trust that she would tell me honestly. Well, actually, you know what?
yeah,
Yeah, I felt that way when you did X, Y, Z. And she's like, no, 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 no. This is a reflection on her, not you. You're such a giver. You're such a this. Like, and I was like, oh, yeah, that was my sense. But like, I just wanted to check. And also, by the way, that's important when you get feedback from, if someone's having a reaction in your life and you know, and you care about this person and you're getting that feedback back, it is important to check in and say, yeah, do I do this? You know, is this me or is this that person? And it was very clear that this was that person in this situation, even though I had done things that triggered it. my other friend was like, no, 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 you don't do that at all, like to me or to, I've never said, she's known me for decades. So I think that that's important, that to check in with friends and even give permission for honesty and for
Yeah.
permission for that honest feedback. And not just to choose cheerleaders, even though it makes us feel good. But I think you can only do that if you, again, we're coming full cycle back to what we spoke about at the beginning, Gila, which was you can only do that and take honest feedback and can only be honest with yourself about who you are and where you're at if you know you're intrinsically lovable, good enough, and worthy. And if you have that intact, that sense of self intact enough to feel like I'm lovable no matter what. Now let me look at what stuff I have to work on. Now let me look at where I really messed up. Now let me look at what my issues are, what my problems are, where I need to improve. But the baseline is I'm solid, I'm good, I'm lovable, God loves me, my friends love me, I know I'm lovable. And we have to get to that. And unfortunately, that's where I think a lot of the work is needed, is that foundational work, that base. People don't know that about themselves, that you are lovable, you are good, like you are worthy, like it's really important. We've taken on criticism as in that it's about us. And I know that you mentioned that beautifully before about separating the action from the person, but I really do feel that that's something we have to really build and constantly work on.
Right.
Part of our dating stuff,
I,
dating.
I'm so happy that you mentioned that point about constantly working on it, because I think for a lot of us, we struggle with that. We struggle with that feeling inherently worthy and inherently lovable, and it can kind of feel like sometimes like, okay, so I struggle with feelings of worthiness, and yeah, when someone tells me something, I do kind of get defensive and I do kind of get hard on myself, and I think the awareness that I'm getting defensive, the awareness that this is an area that I have to work on, the awareness that I need to separate my action from who I am is invaluable, because even if you get into that phase of defense, even if you get into that feeling of defensiveness and feeling of like, oh my gosh, I messed up, I'm a terrible person or whatever, if we can have that window of awareness and realize, hold on a second, right? Just need to pause, take a deep breath, slow down, recognize, right? Like that. Yeah, you know what? I'm working towards being more compassionate, more loving towards myself, and compassion to who, compassionate to where, to ourselves is huge as well. So even if this is an area of struggle for someone, right? To feel that inherent love, feeling inherently lovable and inherently worthy. It's firstly, I think you're in good company. If that's a struggle that we're working on. And secondly, I think like having the awareness is a huge part of the
So
journey.
what would you say, Gila? Like if I notice I'm getting defensive, someone said something and I'm getting defensive, and I'm aware of that, what can I do next?
So that's a great question, and I think firstly I'm a huge fan of slowing down, right? Just taking a big
Or
pause, right? Um,
defensive, right?
like just whatever, I'm feeling defensive. Okay, I don't have to respond. And it's I was talking to a client today about this, and like she had a situation with one of her kids, and it's our friends make friends with the phrase, let me think about it, right? And just slow down, right? Pause, think about it. Some people just kind of need to take a deep breath and think about it. Talk to those people, right? Like what you did with your friend is a perfect example. But you can only do that once you've paused, right? And you've kind of like, okay,
Yes.
let me stop and think about it, right? Because so often we feel like I've got to react now, right? And there's so few situations in life that we have to react straight away to, right? Okay, if your house is on fire, you got to deal with that right away, right? Don't pause and think about it. Just call the fire brigade, right? But most things, just pause, try and understand where that's coming from. See if you could, there's people that you can touch base with and discuss, and then come back and revisit it.
Beautiful. Yeah, a rabbi once said to me that any decision or any reaction that you feel you need to make in a hurry, in a rush, is your Yetzer Hara, like your voice of self-sabotage, right? Like that energy that we have that wants us to self-sabotage. That Yetzer Hara voice is always rushing is one of the strategies of it. So whenever you feel this immediate need, I feel this all the time. It's so in my personality because I'm fire. I'm like that fiery,
Yeah.
intense. And I have to really, my husband will be like, sleep on it, you know? So, like, don't react straight away. Sleep on it. Sleep. And it's so hard because like that knee jerk, but it's also that defensiveness. Part of the reaction I feel, for me at least, is the defensiveness of wanting to stand up for myself, like, to, you know, and I'll go over and over in my head, and I'm like, no, 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 it's okay, you're good, like, you're okay, you just think about this, if this is true for you or not, and then the next day I write so much a better text or a better email or a better whatever it is, it's so much better. So yes, sleep on it, I think, is really important. Maura Cookie's asking, can you talk more about learning to trust yourself? Yes, we can. I This is again this is one of the core pillars that I teach people, whoever, married, single, because I think this is something we need to practice across the board. And trusting yourself is about, the first step. Again, my experience is the first step is to know what you feel, and that sounds obvious, but it's not.
No.
Know what you actually feel, and it's valid. Doesn't mean it's the right thing and you're going to act from it and make the decision right now. But what do I actually feel about something, rather than what should I feel? So what happens is we have a reaction, we have a feeling, and then we have a reaction to the feeling inside of us. And that reaction to the feeling is more of the problem than the feeling, right? So I have a feeling, and then I'll criticize the feeling, I judge the feeling, I escape the feeling, I do all sorts of things, repress the feeling, I do all sorts of things to the feeling. And the feeling's not the issue, it's that reaction that keeps us really stuck and confused. So in order to trust yourself, the first step is just to say, oh, what am I feeling? Like, let me look inside with just compassionate curiosity, right? It has to be with compassionate curiosity. That's interesting that I did that. Well, that's interesting that I feel that way. I don't have to know why. The head likes to hijack and tell us why we feel things. Fill in the blank and come up with a nice theory. We have no clue if that theory is right? The feelings happen in the body, and the feelings happen from the subconscious. So the reason I created the course I created is not because we need any more dating coaches. They've got a lot of great dating coaches out there, thank God. And I didn't want to be another dating coach. I created this because I really feel this affects dating, but it affects everyone all the time. And it's really about, how do I get in touch with myself on a deeper level, on the subconscious level. There's a subconscious part of the brain that stores up our belief systems and feelings and everything, and it expresses through the body. It gives you information, it gives you feedback. It's just a different frequency. It's not coming through thoughts in the head, it's coming through frequency of sensation and feeling in the body, and we usually ignore it. And that's the first point of lack of self-trust. The reason we don't trust ourselves, we don't listen, not number one, to what we feel. So that's the first thing, is listening to these other faculties. You know, I read a terrible statistic that said 98% or something ridiculously high of women who, God forbid, were sexually assaulted or assaulted in life in general, had a gut feeling a few minutes before that something was off, and they ignored it. They ignored it in themselves. They had a sense something's not right, something's unsafe, I'm ignoring it. No, don't ignore it. Whatever it is, it doesn't mean you're gonna have to act from it, but don't ignore it, because your body doesn't lie, right? There's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score, if you want to read it. Whoever is listening, if you like this idea of the body reflects what's in the subconscious. So what I teach people to do, and what we all need to learn to do, and I try and practice, is to tune into the body, to listen to it, and you can get information from the body. You can get information from different parts of your body, like the knot in your stomach, the constriction in your chest. You can actually talk to it from your higher self, your whether you want to call it neshama, that's spiritual, but from your adult self, your higher self. You can have a dialogue with different parts of you, and then you can actually A, resolve it, and B, get clarity around where you're going. So first step is listen to it, and then second step is ask what it needs to feel safe, or what it needs to shift, right? You can ask yourself different parts of yourself, your gut and your heart. Like, your heart is about connection, openness, receiving, love. What would I need to feel like I want to be open and love with this situation or this person, let's say? Or what would I need to feel forgiveness? What would I need to move forward? What would I need to be able to ask for a raise? What would I need to be, whatever it is, you can ask your heart these questions, and you'll get an answer. You will get it. If you just quieten down your conscious mind, you will get an answer. Now, the challenge is that we don't always know how to do that, to quieten down the conscious mind, or we've never practiced it, but it's just practice. It is practice, and anyone can learn it. But this is the kind of, I hope this helps Maura Cookie in some way. But this is the direction to go in, to be able to listen to yourself. Because when I just finished on this point, that when we go just from the head, which is what a lot of people do, they come up with all the different theories, pros and cons of every position. Of, if I say yes, this will happen. If I say no, that'll happen. And you can come up with all the different aspects intellectually about a situation, whether it's dating or otherwise. And if you don't connect to the heart and the gut, you're just spinning wheels in your head. It's like a car just spinning wheels. And you get so confused because you're going around and around because you're only using one faculty. And that's really the answer. The answer is connecting the head to the heart, to the gut, as well as using Torah as a map and a mentor as an outdoor signpost. And
Right.
between those five, then you'll get a really clear sense of self-trust.
I love that you spoke about that and about listening to our feelings, because I once was involved in a really, really toxic situation. And if I look back at like when the first kind of time I realized what it was like the first interaction I had with this person was there was something off. And I sensed it, and sometimes, you know, we excuse it with religiously, like, oh, judge the other person favorably. And we sometimes we misunderstand what it means, judging the other person favorably. Judging the other person favorably doesn't mean whitewashing their actions, right? This person can be a toxic person. You could still judge them favorably. They may be very, very traumatized, right? And a very traumatized individual. And judging them favorably means understanding that if I was born in their circumstances and raised in their circumstances, I'd probably be similar.
Right.
But it does still means that I have to step away from it. And I think I love that. I think it's such an important point that you spoke about, is that learning to listen to what our feelings are telling us. Because just like God sends the process, God created us and the world in a way that teaches us, right? Our emotions, our feelings, our body, it all teaches us something. And when we can slow down and we can like be curious about it, right? Like, why am I feeling like something's off about here, right? Like, what's that about? Right. So I love that you spoke about it, because it's, again, I think it's so important, and I don't hear it spoken about enough. So thank you, Jackie. That's very,
It's
very valuable.
really important. And so one of the biggest struggles with dating is that singles will not know how to navigate and make decisions for themselves because they don't trust themselves. It's one of the biggest blocks and problems. I love that you said we must be, I'm going to call it discerning. So we shouldn't be judgmental of a person. And I think this is a very important point. Again, people are so scared to be judgmental, so they kind of think they should turn themselves into a pretzel to like the guy. So you don't marry some guy or think you should because you don't want to be mean. I'm sorry, but a lot of people will feel that way. But we have to be extremely discerning. Discerning is like you see the toxic behavior, but you don't have to be judgmental of the person, because according to where, as you said, they've come from and how maybe God judges them according to where they've come from, they're doing great for their life, let's say. But do I want that specific behavior around me or kids or whatever? No, not necessarily. And I can hold both. We're complex people. We can hold both, where we can actually see something for what it is and then make a decision. I don't really want to be around that person because of that behavior, but I wish them well. I'm going to pray for them. I'm going to help them in some other way, right? But I don't want to be exposed to that right now because I'm in a different place, and you know, it's not good for me. So I think we have to be able to learn to set boundaries and be very, very discerning, dating wise or otherwise, but not judgmental of the person. And I think those two get conflated also. It's a
Yeah.
problem, you know.
Yeah. And to go back to your feeling mean when you're saying no, I heard this in a business sense, and it applies, I think, equally well in dating, is the kindest thing. Like if you have an employee that's underperforming, the kindest thing you could do for them is to let them go, right?
Yes.
So that they can find the right place where they can flourish. Same thing, if you're dating someone and it's not the right fit, the kindest thing is to end that relationship so you could both go on and find the right people for you. So it's not mean to say no, it's kind. It's you know, clarity, and you know, clarity, this is the person for me, this is not the person for me, is at the end of the day what we all want.
Love it. I love it. Question: did you get any Q&A in your? Do you have any questions that people wrote in? I have a couple,
So
so I thought maybe we should address some.
I actually did not get a chance to check it beforehand, so let's go with yours.
Okay, so I just have a couple that I thought were really good. Tips for staying present on a date and not going into future and fantasizing.
Ooh.
because
Ooh.
it's a big problem. That again, I don't know if it's more of a female problem, but a lot of women will say this to me over the over the years. If I get excited, if I like a guy, I'm gonna jump into the future. I'm gonna imagine already like it's happening. How do I not do that? And then I get devastated when it doesn't happen, right? So they recognize they shouldn't do that, but they want to know tips for staying present. So I'll give one tip, and maybe you can give one tip. I just think that staying present with just like the very next step. Like, what's the next? I want to go on the next. Do I want to go on the next date or not? That's it. That's the only thing you can be assessing. And anything outside of that, you're in illusion. You're not in reality at all. And if as long as you start to acknowledge that this is reality and that's not reality, then you can give it less power. And also, I would even set a boundary that we don't realize we can set a boundary in our own minds. You can actually set a boundary and say, I'm not going down that path. If the first thought will pop in, but you can boundary it at that point. It's the second thought that we're really accountable for, right? Not the first thought in our
Yeah.
head. So I imagine it like I'm walking down a corridor and there's into that room in that direction is the fantasizing room, let's say. And then a thought starts and I go, nope, I'm not going down that room because I know that's taking me out of reality. I'm going to close the door and keep on walking in the corridor. Like that's it. So you can set boundaries in your head like that. Literally, if you know that's toxic, it's going to take me out of reality. It's not going to be good for me. Set a boundary in your head and come back to the present and say, do I want to go on one more date? And that's it. That's all you can work out in that moment.
Yeah, I love that. And I think also sometimes asking yourself is like, what is the question? What is my question right now? Because, right, sometimes, you're on a first date and a second date and you're like, I don't know if I want to marry this guy. But that's not your question at this point. Your question at this point is, do I want to meet this guy again? Right?
Yeah.
So sometimes just asking yourself, like, what is the question that I need to answer right now is helpful.
Yeah, that's nice. And like, what else do I need to know about this person to feel like I know them better, or that we're going in the same direction, or whatever? Yeah, I love that. What's the right question? Because when you're jumping to a fantasy, you're not asking any questions. You're filling in the gaps and you're imagining.
Right.
Love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so that's really important, guys. Stay in the present. Don't jump into the future. It's really important. And I will say something about like the future focus, whether it's positive fantasizing or what if scenarios, like when you're single, of like, what if it never happens for me? What if I never get married? Like, I was going to be a cat lady who was going to die in my apartment, and the stench would be so bad after 3 days, people would then find me. Like, that's where I went in my head in the despairing moments. And so any future projection, whether it is terribly negative and despairing, or positive fantasizing in the sense of like a specific guy you've just met and now you're imagining the flipper already, those future projections are always dangerous and they're not in reality. So any future projection, you're already in Yetzirah, I want to say. I know it's a bit bold.
I agree with you 100%. I love that you're saying that. And I also want to add to that is that whenever you notice yourself going there, you can always pull yourself back to the present, right? And the more you do that, the more you build your being mindful, being present muscles. So even if that's a tendency, just every time you notice yourself going it down
Yeah.
that lane of whatever the future holds, just remember, I don't know what the future holds, right? I don't know. Let's go back to where we are right now.
It's so convincing, though. It is so convincing, that future vision. And we spend so much time invested in worst case scenarios and really using the power of our imagination to imagine like the worst case scenario. And then, and then we have all this fear in reaction to that. And then we feel depressed and say it's so depressing. So we don't
Yeah.
realize that we turn our pain into suffering sometimes
Yeah.
when we don't need to. And I think that we need to. Why aren't we investing our mind into the best case scenario? Again, not about a specific person because we don't know. That we don't know. But in general, the best case scenario, rather than what if I'm going to never get married? What if I have the best marriage of my life and relationship? Like, do we ever say that? I mean, I don't know if I ever said that. But that idea of like, what if this turns out to be amazing? What if this
Yeah.
turns out to be better than I could imagine?
Right, and it's good that you said that because also like the best way to kind of fight our thoughts is to question them, right? Because when we sort of question them, they kind of lose their power, right? So you're thinking of this like, I'm going to be this cat lady. Like, how do you know you're going to be this cat lady, right? What if it's not true, right? What if it doesn't
Yeah.
happen, right? If you just sort of question them, they lose their power a lot.
Nice. I like that. What if, yeah, how do I know? I like that one. All right, last one. How to tell if a guy is serious about dating? Do you just ask, are you dating for marriage? How to tell if a guy is serious about dating? Um, I would say yes, ask. I would say yes, say I'm marriage minded. I'm dating with a marriage minded mindset, or I'm dating for marriage. And is that something you're interested in, especially depending on where you're finding this person? Um,
Yeah.
what would you
Yeah,
say?
I agree with you 100%. I mean, if you ask them, I think a lot of times we're afraid of asking because we're afraid they're going to say no, right? Well, you've got your answer then if they say no, right? So I think
Right.
asking clarity is a big, I watched there's a new movie called American Fiction now, and there was a line in it that was so incredible where the guy was talking about that his dad never knew him, and the brother said to him, but what if he would have known you and rejected you? And he said to him, at least he would have rejected me for who I am. And at the time, like, it's such a powerful line because we're so afraid of clarity and of the rejection or whatever else that happens. But actually, clarity is so helpful, right? When we
Right.
have clarity, we can take the next step,
Yeah.
whatever that next step is,
Yeah.
right? So if you're dating this fantastic guy and you're afraid of asking him whether he's marriage minded or not, right? Like, we're afraid because what if he says no, right?
Right.
Well,
That's
at
good.
least then we have clarity,
Yeah.
right? As opposed to dating and dating and dating and finding out in 3 years that he's not marriage minded, right? Clarity is our
Right.
friend.
So we want to weed out those people. If he's going to run because you're going to ask if you're dating for marriage, then that's not a good thing. And I will add one last thing before we go, which is that I would watch that person's actions. If they're responsive, they're consistent, they're available. Anyone who's like, oh, I'm just chill, or we'll see what happens, but like constantly pushing off any real kind of conversation, I would not. You're worth more than that. And I think that's a very important piece that you want to see how someone acts. Is their action matching what they're saying? And you can tell pretty quickly after a little while whether people just can't hold the facade up too much. You see how
Yeah,
they're acting towards people that they don't want to impress, and what happens when no one's looking. What do they sacrifice their time for? That kind of stuff. Like if they always make you go to them. I had a client once that always had to go to the guy's house or the guy's side of town or whatever. If they're making you always go to them, they're not so interested. They're just not so interested. And so they're not so committed, right? So you want to make
right.
sure about how they're
Yeah.
acting. So look at their actions as well as obviously clarify at the beginning what their
Yeah.
intentions.
And sometimes there's a disconnect between what they say and what they do.
Yeah.
Always believe their actions. When someone shows
Yes.
you who they are,
Believe
believe them
them.
because believe, yeah, believe what they do, not what they say, because actions is where
I
it's
know.
at.
It's so hard. It's so hard, but it's the beautiful journey of life and growth that we're in. And yeah, I think I hope people felt empowered. And
Yeah.
I've frozen. You
And
frozen? I frozen. There we go.
am I frozen? And
Yeah,
and I think
back.
I go back to what you say, and it's these concepts and these principles, they apply to dating and they apply to almost every other challenge that people go through in life. So
Yeah, they do.
it's the journey of life.
The journey of life. Well, it's been awesome speaking to you, Gila, and
Amazing.
thank you
Thank you
for
so
coming
much,
on
Jackie.
and sharing your
Thank
wisdom.
you.
If people want to see your book, find your book, where would they find
Um,
it?
you could get it directly from me or you can get it from Amazon. So
Ah,
either is good, or any Jewish bookstore as well should be.
Living Beautifully. Is that what's called?
That's
Living
correct, yes.
Beautifully. And if people want to be in touch with me about any of the stuff we talked about tonight, please DM me. Happy to speak to you. And have a great night.
Thank you, Jackie, for what you're doing. You're amazing. You're amazing.
From Hashem. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.